On the morning of 15th August 1945, radios across Japan carried a voice most citizens had never heard before. Emperor Hirohito spoke in formal, distant language, but the meaning was unmistakable. The war was lost. Cities had burned. Hiroshima and Nagasaki had been destroyed by atomic bombs. Factories stood silent or shattered. Millions of soldiers and civilians were dead, missing, displaced, or returning to a country that could barely feed itself. Japan had pursued empire through steel, ships, fuel, and military command. Now the empire was gone, and the same industrial machine that had served war lay under occupation. The question was no longer how Japan could conquer Asia. It was whether Japan could survive at all, and how it would rebuild. What followed was not a simple recovery. It was a reordering of power. The old family empires, known as Zaibatsu, were broken apart by the Allied occupation. These groups had once linked banks, trading houses, mines, shipyards, and factories under family control. To American reformers, they looked like pillars of militarism and monopoly. In October 1945, occupation authorities began the process of dissolution. Holding companies were targeted. Family control was weakened. Shares were sold. Directors were removed. But destroying the old structure did not create a new economy overnight. Japan still needed credit, raw materials, export markets, and trust. Companies were weak, banks were cautious, inflation was severe, and coal and food were scarce. The occupation wanted democracy and demilitarization, but the Cold War soon changed the calculation. A ruined Japan was no longer useful to Washington. A stable, productive Japan could become a capitalist anchor in East Asia. In 1949, Joseph Dodge, an American banker, sent to stabilize the economy, imposed a hard program of balanced budgets, reduced subsidies, and monetary discipline. The yen was fixed at 360 to the dollar. Inflation slowed, but the shock was painful. Companies failed, workers lost jobs. Then in June 1950, the Korean War began. United Nations forces needed trucks, textiles, repair work, and supplies. Orders flowed into Japanese factories. The war next door became a grim economic rescue. Yet, emergency demand alone could not explain what came next. Japan needed a way to coordinate growth without returning openly to the old family monopolies. Out of that need came the Keiretsu. Keiretsu were networks of companies tied together by share ownership, loans, trading, relationships, long-term contracts, and regular meetings among executives. They were not identical copies of the Zaibatsu. They had no single family sitting at the top. They operated within post-war laws and under new political conditions. But they restored something Japan badly needed: organized trust. There were two main forms. Horizontal Keiretsu gathered major firms around a central bank and trading company. Groups such as Mitsubishi, Mitsui, Sumitomo, Fuyo, Sanwa, and Daiichi Kangyo linked manufacturers, insurers, merchants, and finance. Members held shares in one another, did business with one another, and met in presidents' councils that helped maintain cohesion. Vertical Keiretsu were built around large manufacturers, especially in automobiles and electronics. Toyota, Nissan, Hitachi, and others depended on layers of suppliers and distributors. The core company did not need to own every workshop. It could guide standards, technology, financing, and production rhythm through durable relationships. At the center stood the main bank. In an economy where security markets are less important than bank lending, the main bank became lifeline, monitor, and rescuer. It supplied credit, watched performance, and intervened when a member company was in trouble. This system protected firms from sudden market pressure and hostile takeover. Cross-shareholding made shares less available to outsiders. Long-term lending gave managers room to invest in capacity research and exports before profits appeared. This was not unlimited money, and it was not magic. It worked because banks, companies, and officials shared a national priority: rebuilding productive strength. The Ministry of International Trade and Industry, created in 1949, helped shape that priority. MITI did not command the economy like a military headquarters, but it influenced access to foreign exchange, technology imports, licenses, and industrial rationalization plans. In a country short of dollars and raw materials, those powers mattered. Japan did not try to rebuild everything equally. It concentrated on sectors where scale, discipline, and export potential could change the national future. Steel, shipbuilding, chemicals, automobiles, machine tools, and electronics became arenas of intense effort. Firms imported technology, improved it, cut waste, and pushed quality higher. The Keiretsu also changed the factory floor. At Toyota, the production ideas that became the Toyota production system grew from the late 1940s and 1950s. Kiichiro Toyota had argued that parts should arrive just when needed. Taichi Ohno and others developed methods to reduce waste, expose defects, and make production flow. Just in time was not simply a slogan. It required suppliers that could respond quickly, honestly, and repeatedly. It depended on long-term cooperation, repeated learning, and confidence that gains would be shared rather than captured by one side alone. Inside a vertical Keiretsu, suppliers could receive technical help, steady orders, and financing. In return, they accepted demanding targets for cost, timing, and quality. A mistake in one small shop could stop an assembly line, so trust had to become operational. Over time, this made Japanese manufacturing faster, leaner, and more precise. By the 1960s, the results were visible. Japan entered a period of high-speed growth. The income doubling plan announced under Prime Minister Hayato Ikeda in 1960 captured the mood of ambition. Factories expanded, cities grew, wages rose, families bought televisions, washing machines, and cars. Japan joined the OECD in 1964. The same year, Tokyo hosted the Olympic Games. By the 1970s and 1980s, Japanese cars and electronics were no longer cheap substitutes. They were global competition. Toyota, Honda, Nissan, Sony, Panasonic, Toshiba, and Hitachi forced Western companies to rethink quality and speed. The United States and Europe watched with admiration and alarm. Trade friction grew. Critics accused Japan of closed markets and protected corporate blocs. Japanese officials and executives answered that they had built strength through patience, savings, and cooperation. The truth was more complicated. Keiretsu helped Japan coordinate investment and defend companies through difficult cycles. They encouraged long-term planning. They reduced destructive short-term pressure. They helped suppliers and manufacturers improve together. But the same system could also protect weak firms, hide bad loans, and resist change. Loyalty, once a source of stability, could become a shield against necessary reform. The danger became clear in the late 1980s. Easy credit, rising land prices, and soaring stock values created a massive asset bubble. Cross-held shares made corporate balance sheets look stronger as markets climbed. Banks lent heavily against inflated assets. Tokyo real estate seemed impossibly valuable. The Nikkei stock index reached its peak at the end of 1989. Then, the bubble burst. The 1990s became known as the lost decade, though the damage lasted longer. Land prices fell, banks carried non-performing loans. Companies that had relied on patient finance now faced stagnation. The main bank system, once praised for discipline, struggled under the weight of hidden losses. Global investors demanded transparency. Deregulation opened markets. Foreign competition increased. The old Keiretsu bonds loosened. Some groups adapted. Cross-shareholding declined. Banks merged. Companies sold assets and accepted outside capital. Sony, once shaped by postwar networks, became a global technology and entertainment company operating beyond traditional group boundaries. Toyota preserved deep supplier relationships, but it also globalized production and learned to manage risk across continents. The Keiretsu did not disappear. It became less rigid, less enclosed, and more selective. Even then, the old lessons did not die. In 2011, the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami exposed the fragility of modern supply chains. In the years after, Toyota and others mapped suppliers more carefully and built reserves for critical parts, including semiconductors. During the global chip shortages of the early 2020s, the world rediscovered a truth Japan had learned in ruins. Production is never only about factories. It is about relationships, information, finance, and resilience. By 2026, as governments competed over advanced semiconductors, Japan again turned toward coordinated industrial strategy. Projects around TSMC in Kumamoto and Rapidus in Hokkaido reflected a new version of an old instinct. The aim was not to recreate the closed groups of the 1960s. The chip industry is too global, too expensive, and too technically demanding for that. But the logic of secure networks returned. Government support, major corporations, banks, suppliers, universities, and foreign partners were again being arranged around strategic production. This is why Keiretsu matters. It was never merely a business model. It was Japan's answer to a national emergency. After 1945, the country could not rebuild through isolated firms fighting alone. It needed banks willing to lend, suppliers willing to commit, manufacturers willing to teach, and officials willing to guide scarce resources toward future strength. The system had flaws. It could be closed, cautious, and resistant to outsiders. It helped create stability, and at times it helped preserve weakness. But at its height, it gave post-war Japan a structure for turning scarcity into discipline and defeat into industrial power. Japan's miracle was not born from one ministry, one company, or one heroic decision. It came from a chain of choices made under pressure. The old empire had collapsed, the Zaibatsu had been broken, inflation threatened recovery, Cold War demand opened a path. Banks, manufacturers, suppliers, and the state then built a new architecture of cooperation. In 1945, Japan stood amid ash, occupation, and uncertainty. Within a generation, its ships, cars, cameras, radios, and machines were moving through the world. The Keiretsu did not erase defeat. It transformed the meaning of power. Japan would no longer seek dominance through conquest. It would pursue influence through production, quality, credit, and coordination. Out of ruin, it built not just an economy, but a system strong enough to reshape the industrial age.